Welcome back to the JMC Reviews. I'm Jake, and this is...
I'm Marlin.
aka Gee. And it's October again, so time to jump into the month of horror. And as we do every year, we're going to start off with a review of a Universal monster classic. From 1954, this is Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Sea underwater thrills never photographed before. Science couldn't explain it, but there it was, alive in the waters of the Amazon.
The only one of the Universal monsters to be made in the 1950s. The creature came about during the time of the Atomic Age and giant monsters, particularly giant bug era of horror movies. So it's kind of interesting that this one is lumped together with all the others. And I guess that's because he does carry some characteristics of the classic monsters. I guess, say, maybe the Mummy or so forth.
But there are differences. Like Frankenstein was created. Dracula was, it's a spiritual thing, you know, vampires and the lust for blood and so on and so forth. This is just a prehistoric creature who has managed to live or be the end result of other prehistoric creatures from the beginning. So there is a difference.
I think he's got a point.
There's a lot of science talk in this movie, some of it a little dated, but they do go into a lot of discussions of prehistoric, fossils, and evolution, I guess.
Yeah, I guess, yes.
For the 1950s. I mean,
it wasn't bad.
The opening tries to combine the talk of God created everything and the earth evolved over millions of years.
Yes, we gotta have both people, both camps satisfied here.
Yeah.
The record of life is written on the land, where 15 million years later...
And to sum up the plot quickly, before we get into the technicals, on an expedition in the Amazon, a group of scientists discover a fossilized hand showing fish and human features. Group leader Dr. Carl Maya leads a team of scientists and fishermen into the Amazon to search for more. The expedition takes them to a location known as the Black Lagoon. And once there, they cross paths with a half-human, half-fish creature who they come to dub the Gill Man, who doesn't take well to humans invading his home.
And for the first time, he lays eyes on a human chick, and that seems to stir something in him.
I'm experiencing a sensation altogether new to me, and frankly, I love it.
So there's that.
Well, it wasn't all that obvious, but yes, it's in the background because he didn't actually try to kill her, kind of tried to carry her away. I guess that's romance.
At least it was to Guillermo del Toro, as we'll get into a little later.
I wish to make love to you.
Oh, no, thank you.
The Creature from the Black Lagoon is probably my third favorite of the Universal classic monsters. My favorite is Dracula, just because he's the classic evil, seductive villain.
The spider spinning his web for the unwary fly. The blood is the life, Mr. Redfield.
My second favorite is the Invisible Man, just for the fact that he's not a supernatural being. He's a normal guy who was driven insane by his own experiment.
There must be a way back. God knows there's a way back.
I like the creature because he's a cool monster, design-wise, and I haven't done it in a while, particularly with the COVID pandemic, but I was a huge fan of swimming when I was younger, and I love going to the ocean, so this movie has a special place for me, just with all the deep diving and...
Very interesting creature. He was the only aqua creature of them all. We don't know how old he is, and it doesn't look like he's going to have any progeny after himself, so...
Yes, it's true. This man has no dick.
Some things that really make this movie work is, one, the design of the Black Lagoon itself. I can't tell exactly how much of it was real and how much of it was made. I know that filming took place in Florida for many parts.
Mm-hmm.
They got a lot of good swamps.
A lot of swamps in Florida, yes.
But for some of the underwater shots, they had to use a water tank. And you can kind of tell in a few shots where they might have used it, particularly the ones where everything's really dark, except for the actors.
Kind of a giveaway.
The underwater cinematography is just gorgeous in my opinion. They really did a good job of capturing the underwater area. The design of the gill man himself, he looks fucking awesome.
Looked pretty good. The only thing I could possibly say is in a close-up shot, looked like the seam on one of his overlapping scales there on his shoulder was a little loose. But other than that, I was surprised at how much they did with that.
There are a few parts of him that look a little rubbery, but for the 1950s, it was pretty impressive, and the design of the creature was done by Disney animator Millicent Patrick. Unfortunately, she didn't get, I just feel like giving her credit because she didn't get full credit for her work at the time. Instead, Bud Westmore, a makeup designer for Universal, is the sole credited person and gladly hogged up all the credit.
Sounds like it was there were a lot of unrecognized female contributors to film early on and all throughout the time that never saw their name in credits.
In the words of The Sopranos, fucking cocksucker. And an interesting thing to note with the gill man, whenever he's underwater, his eyes take on a very sunken black look. But whenever he's on land, he suddenly has bulging fish-like eyes. And that may seem confusing for some, but the filmmakers admit this was like a deliberate choice to separate him from the water and the land. And I think it works. I like how it comes off, because in the water, he's chilling, but cool. On the land, he definitely comes off a lot more threatening.
Yes, he comes a lot more alien-like. Non-human qualities are showing.
And another big thing that makes the Creature from the Black Lagoon an effective film and monster is the music. The music, I've always felt, is a very underappreciated aspect to filmmaking and also particularly to horror movies. There are some effective horror films that don't use a lot of music, but here, this movie of all the Universal monsters was the one that made me jump and kind of get the most chills when I first saw it as a little kid. It all comes from that first sting of the Gill Man's theme.
And I think there was a place where the music would be more prominent in many ways because it was so much underwater scenes that, you know, there's no dialogue, there's no this, and you can only listen to scuba bubbles so much. You got to have something to charge the scene.
The music was done, again, underappreciated. The music composers were uncredited for this film, and it was compiled of 3 people. 6-time Oscar nominee Hans J. Salter, 4-time Oscar winner Henry Mancini, and the main creature theme that we hear whenever he appears was done by B-movie composer Herman Stein.
It is simply awesome.
Yeah.
The movie came to fruition after producer William Alland attended a dinner party during the making of Citizen Kane, and Mexican cinematographer Gabriel Figueroa told him a myth of half-fish, half-human creatures living in the Amazon, and the idea just stuck with him for over 10 years before he decided, let's make a movie out of this. Based on a story by Maurice Zim, the final script was written by Arthur Ross, whose later credits would include the Blake Edwards comedy The Great Race, the infamous TV horror movie Satan's School for Girls, and the Oscar-nominated 1980 film Brubaker.
Alright, yeah.
The other writer was Harry Essex, who, along with William Alland and the film's director Jack Arnold, all worked together on the film It Came from Outer Space, and he would later go on to write the John Wayne Western The Sons of Katie Elder.
Huh.
Yeah. And his last notable film credit, many years later, in 1971, was his written and directed rip-off, I guess, of The Creature from the Black Lagoon, Octoman. A film I should definitely get to one day. William Alland and Jack Arnold have worked on many films. As I mentioned, they did It Came from Outer Space, but they also did the famous 50s horror films Tarantula, The Incredible Shrinking Man. Alland would also go on to produce cult classics such as The Mole People and The Space Children.
Everybody got that?
Now, aside from the creature himself and the brilliant design that went into making the suit, the film is nothing without its cast of actors, and like a lot of 1950s horror films, the cast of characters aren't particularly what I would call the most deep or well-written, but the actors they got to play the characters, I think, were pretty good.
They gave it a go, yes they did.
And they made the most of what they were given. There's a few moments where some of the dialogue is a bit over exposition, and there's this romance part of the film that couldn't feel more forced if you tried. But again, the actors have reasonably good chemistry together, and they have charisma.
It's not awful. Although the role they wrote for the female lead was so limited, just to what was there. And she very well might have been chosen to somebody that can swim, because there was a long scene with her swimming. She's actually pretty good. And she screams a lot.
Shut up! Enough already!
She actually did all of her own swimming stunts for this film.
Right, she looked like she was very good in the water, yes.
Julie Adams, and she commented that of all the films she's done, this is the only movie that people remembered her for. Like I said, not the most complex characters. Her character, Kay, is basically a typical damsel in distress, but she brings a bit of personality to it, and the swimming scene where the creature first takes eyes on her is a very effective sequence, and you can kind of see how he gets mesmerized by her.
She's different than the other ones.
Tits.
Pom-poms, they're delectable too, man.
Richard Carlson as David Reed, her boyfriend, and I guess the main character. He's not terrible, the actor. The character is a bit flat and is one of those scientists that wants to capture the thing alive and is very obsessed about the whole science part of it.
Yes.
The character that kind of stuck out to me the most, more now than when I first saw this film as a kid, is Dr. Mark Williams, played by Richard Denning. The character is your stereotypical, money-obsessed scientist who's in it just for, the glory over the science, but he's an entertaining character. He has a lot more moments, and Denning really plays the hell out of the role. Even though he's a bit of a shit at times, I honestly, when I rewatched it for this review, found myself kind of agreeing with him more than I did before. I mean, don't get me wrong, his obsession over getting the creature and getting notoriety from it.
Yeah, perfectly willing to take a few shots because, the dead body's going to be evidence.
It's our last chance, David. You can see for yourself it's still here.
We're trapped and fighting for our lives, and you're worried about whether people will believe us.
It does become a problem in the second half, but in the first half, when they're trying to figure out what it is, he's the one who has the most sense and logical ideas. Like, yeah, there's this thing down there, bring the spear gun. And when they capture it, David wants to go back and study its cave, and I'm sitting here thinking, Mark's right, they need to get out of there. And yeah, they'd all stayed, they might have had a better chance to take it on when it woke up.
And indeed it did.
His death was inevitable, and can't say I felt sorry, but it was a pretty good underwater fight, I felt.
Yeah, they did a lot. I was surprised. I mean, they did a lot underwater. It's black and white, but, it still was very, very visual, and it worked very well. One thing about this creature, though, the creature, he was a bad guy from the beginning because the scientist that was there doing some geological stuff found the fossil of the creature hand and so on and so forth, and that kind of kicks it in. So he left a couple of his guys there to say, just kind of look for this site. As soon as he's gone out looking for other scientists, the creature attacks, and he just attacks. There's nothing that even mistakenly these two guys did something to disturb his world. They were just there.
I'm an innocent bystander!
Well, there's some debate. Some people have a bit of a sympathy side for the creature, including Julie Adams. She said she always found herself feeling a bit of sympathy for the Gill Man, in the sense that they're kind of invading his turf, that kind of thing.
True, but as far as violence, he starts the violence.
Well, he's an animal, and I'm not saying I take his side, but I can see how, from his point of view, why he might not take kindly to strangers in his swamp.
Excuse me, do you know how to get to town?
Yeah, it's back the way you came.
Aside from Mark, who is just an entertaining asshole, my favorite character, I think, was the captain of the Rita, Lucas, played by Nestor Peva.
I think we can just make it on this side.
It's impossible, but I, Lucas, will do it.
This guy was just a blast. He was funny, made jokes, but when he had to, he wasn't afraid to take names.
You listen to me. You wish to say something, mister? Huh?
And I think of everybody, he was kind of the most even-headed.
Yeah, I got a boat, he hired me, but when it came down to what's going to happen, he's the captain of the boat, and if he makes a decision, that's the way the boat goes.
Yeah.
He showed his stripes in that.
Dr. Mayo, will you please to pull up the anchor? I will start the engine.
The other doctors aren't really the most memorable. The Carl character, the older scientist who brings them all in, he had some good moments in the beginning, but he just kind of drifted into the background as the film went on. And the other guy, whose name I had to write down to remember, Edwin, the guy who the creature attacks and he survives but is really bandaged up. There really wasn't anything to him. He was just there smoking his pipe and then he almost gets killed.
Yeah,
I'm kind of surprised he lived.
Kind of surprised he did.
I'm okay! I'm still okay!
And now for the guys who played the Gill Man himself, Ben Chapman and Rico Browning. More specifically, Rico Browning played the Gill Man for all the underwater scenes. He was a stuntman as well as a professional swimmer/diver, and apparently for this role, he was required to hold his breath for 4 fucking minutes at a time. Which just sounds insane, because even at my best swimming, I could barely make it to a minute.
Well, air!
Yes, he was out there swimming around in the water, and it wasn't as though you were splicing shots together. He was out in the water being a gill man.
And that suit had no air tank in it.
No.
So, yeah, he was all deep down there on his own, and I guess they liked him because he was the only actor to appear in all 3 of the Creature movies.
Awesome!
And Ben Chapman, for all the land scenes, did a good job being the menacing, hulking, almost Frankenstein-like monster. Ben Chapman actually had a few accidents while they were filming this movie, because with the big bulging eyes that they gave him for the land scenes, he could barely see out of that costume. The scene where he attacks the fisherman on the beach, that scene was originally supposed to have him pick up the fisherman and throw him at the camera, because, and it's a little late to bring this up, but the movie was filmed in 3D to cash in on the Vincent Price movie House of Wax, and they wanted to do that as a 3D effect, but the wires kept breaking, so they just settled for him strangling the guy. And when they filmed that scene, the actor, you see him swing the machete at him. Apparently they were using a real machete, and due to bad coordination and I guess being unable to see, Chapman missed grabbing him by the arm, and the machete actually hit him in the head. Luckily, the foam rubber in the headpiece stopped it and the blade wasn't that sharp. But god damn.
I was going to say, well, at least they didn't have a sharp machete.
You are fat person! Yeah!
And during the scene where he carries Julie Adams through the cave unconscious, classic monster carrying the girl shot, you may notice it looks like he's moving carefully while carrying her. That's because he really had no idea where he was going, and Julie Adams had to just lie there with her eyes closed, so she had no idea where they were going. And this resulted in Chapman accidentally banging her head into the rock wall and scraping her forehead open.
Yes.
Ow.
Watch where you're going, you fool!
Funny enough, kind of like James Earl Jones and David Prowse, Chapman and Browning did not meet each other during filming. All their scenes were shot separately, and they actually didn't meet each other in person until over 20 years after the movie was made.
There you go.
Well, that's more than you can say for James Earl Jones and David Prowse.
Yes.
The ending for the film is a bit abrupt. The Gill Man takes Kay, David shows up, he almost fights him, and then the doctor and Lucas come in and shoot the Gill Man, and then he just hobbles back into the water and sinks to the bottom. If you didn't know that there were sequels, what would your assumption be with this ending?
Looks like he was going down to die.
The filmmakers always said that their intention was to leave it a little ambiguous, just in case they decided to make a follow-up, which they did. And while the sequels may be a little sillier, they definitely took very good advantage of the character of the Gill Man.
He was going deeper and deeper, and it looked like he was going to die, but it was also part of the script that at the end, the scientists that were left decided not to shoot him, just to let him go.
No.
Think of the money!
That's fucking asses in fucking seats.
And the film was a reasonably good success, and a strong fan base kept it alive. The movie has spawned beyond its 2 sequels, a lot of collectible merchandise, including a very famous pinball machine game.
Okay.
And as I mentioned earlier, the film was an influence for Guillermo del Toro's Oscar-winning movie, The Shape of Water. A movie that, as he put it, gave the more happy romantic outcome to the sea monster and the human woman's relationship. Whatever makes you happy, Del Toro.
Yes.
That they lived happily ever after? I believe they did.
Oh, that ain't right.
So all in all, Creature from the Black Lagoon is a good staple, more mainstream piece of 1950s monster horror. Overall, I'd say it's a reasonably well-made, chilling horror movie, and I'm happy I got to see it again, and I'd gladly watch it again.
It was low budget, but it wasn't sloppily done. I think they had tight shots. You could follow the story pretty well. And for the most part, the actors made the film work.
Would you recommend it?
To somebody who liked old-fashioned sci-fi, yes.
Cool. If you're into, say, the Sci-Fi Diner, this is definitely up your alley. And hope everybody's October is off to a good start. I will see you again soon, this time with my buddy Alex and a much bloodier type of horror.
Amen.
What happened one summer 5 years ago is about to happen again and again and again.
water down where it's wet and take it from me under the sea.